Kantse, I'm Kristen Achkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. The day after U.S. President Donald Trump's Liberation Day and the presentation of new tariffs, Prime Minister Mark Carney paused his campaign. Carney held a press conference in Ottawa, and it was heavy on tariffs and the economy. He warned Canadians that economic times will be tough and that the Canadian economy will have to fundamentally change, and that Canada needs to go its own way because the United States is no longer a reliable trade partner.
We will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations. Breaking down internal trade barriers so that we can have one Canadian economy, not 13. Making Canada more productive and competitive. Building things in this country again. Millions more homes. Building clean and conventional energy. Building more public transport, more mines, more assembly lines.
Prime Minister Mark Carney, along with the Liberal Party, have yet to comment on Carney's father being the former principal of a Northwest Territories Indian day school during the 1960s. Carney's father, Robert Carney, was the principal of the Joseph Burr Tyrrell School in Fort Smith. It was previously known as the Fort Smith Federal Day School. Some survivors of that school tell APTN News Robert Carney was, quote, great, and another said, I don't have any negative stories. Carney was also the chief of school programs in the Northwest Territories. He also worked at a faculty post at the University of Alberta. He later died in 2009. Despite multiple attempts and after a promise to send a statement, the Liberal Party has yet to comment. And you can read more about that story from our web reporter Kathleen Martins by going over to our website at aptnnews.ca. Robert Carney's past was also a topic of discussion for this week's Truth in Politics panel with Winnipeg Free Press Negon Sinclair and former Grand Chief and journalist Sheila North. Here's that interview with our Dennis Ward.
Yeah, so a lot of misinformation is out there. So I'm glad that we get a chance to sort of correct the record, not talk about, simply taking Robert Carney's legacy, Mark Carney's father, and then placing it on Canada's new Prime Minister, because he said things that are quite different to his father. But simply put, Robert Carney, for a brief period, was a principal of a day school. He was the principal of his day school in Northwest Territories. It was a school that included both a high school and an elementary school. And then for a period of time very short amount of time, ran schools as a superintendent kind of model, overseeing the schools in the Northwest Territories. So naturally would have seen, and therefore the residential school system as we would now know it, of course, a system that highly problematic and of course very violent for many of those who experienced those schools directly. And then later, as a historian at the University of Alberta, he did things like run for office, lost in Edmonton, and then later defended his legacy as a participant within the residential school system. Wrote many essays talking about the more or less complaining about the ways in which others, like the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, personified residential schools. He said things like, why aren't we talking about the good stories? Why do we have to keep focusing on trauma? Really things that we now know of as highly problematic. And we would often call those kinds of individuals residential school denialists, not that they are denying the schools or that even that atrocities happen at the schools, but then wanted to sort of obscure the legacy of the schools by talking about a few good experiences, or maybe somebody learned a skill or had a good day here and there. The fact is that residential schools, nothing about that policy was beneficial. It never should have happened. And so Robert Carney, I think, is on the wrong side of history. And one thing I also discovered is that Mark Carney is not his father. So he has said a lot of things that are certainly contrarian to his father. He says things like Canada's economy should be run by Indigenous knowledge and values, which anyone who believes in residential schools would never say. So clearly Mark Carney, I think, has to be accountable for things that his father said. But at the same time, I think he's broken away from that legacy and is on the way to do so more.
Sheila, your thoughts on this and whether it should have an impact on Mark Carney's run here?
No, I think appreciate Nigon's perspectives and laying it out there. I do understand why people would be concerned and make those associations. And for that, I think that Mark Carney at some point needs to come out and straighten that out on what he thinks and how differently he might think, because it is an issue that we all have come to see more of how people think about what happened during these times. Sure, there might have been good outcomes here and there, but the assimilation and the atrocities that happened during those times outweigh all of those, and we can't deny that. And I think that at some point he does have to come out and clarify his thoughts on it, even more so.
The Serious Incident Response Team, or CIRT, have finished their investigation into the police shooting death of Steven Iggy Dedam. It found no reasonable grounds that an RCMP officer broke the law when he fatally shot Dedam in Elsipogtog First Nation in New Brunswick last September. According to CIRT, on September 8, 2024, 2 RCMP officers responded to 2 911 calls that an adult male had weapons, stating he wanted to kill himself. When officers arrived, Dedam was in a bedroom possessing multiple throwing axes and showing signs of intoxication. Officers instructed Dedam to drop the weapons or he would be tased. CIRT says video shows Dedam threw one axe in the direction of officers and others in the home. As he made a motion to throw another axe, one officer discharged a taser, which was ineffective, and another officer discharged his firearm, striking Dedam. An emergency response team was called and Dedam later died in hospital. The Mountie involved in the incident provided a statement of events through his lawyer, while the other officer provided an interview to CIRT. Following the incident, the people of Elsipogtog called for an end to police violence and the removal of the RCMP from their community. Dedam was one of 15 Indigenous people who died while interacting with various police forces in 2024. In a statement, CIRT Director Aaron Noss added, "My review of the evidence indicates there are no reasonable grounds to believe the subject officer committed a criminal offense. I recognize that this was a tragic situation and the events outlined in this report have been exceptionally challenging for all involved." Elsipogtog is located about 2 hours northeast of Fredericton. And you can read more about that story, including the full CIRT report, by going to our website at aptnnews.ca. APTN News has yet to hear a response from the family and the community of Elsipogtog. Edmonton police are asking the public for its help in identifying an Indigenous woman found deceased in central Edmonton last December. On December 29th, Edmonton police received a report of a female who was found deceased in a waste disposal bin just south of downtown Edmonton. Surveillance footage from 9:30 a.m. that day before shows a female walking northbound alone up an alley, then getting into the bin. Her death is not deemed suspicious. Police say they have been unable to confirm her identity and provided this composite sketch with the hopes she can be identified. The woman is Indigenous, 25 to 35 years old, with shoulder-length brown and red and brown eyes, brown and red hair and brown eyes. She's 5'8" with a slim build. She also had this flower tattoo on her right shoulder blade, which is about 12 by 9 centimeters. At the time, she was wearing a brown puffer jacket and brown boots similar to the pictures here. Anyone with information is asked to contact Edmonton Police at 780-423-4567 or Crime Stoppers. An update now to a serious hit-and-run incident that happened last month in Winnipeg. The family of Margaret Kobenis say that an arrest has been made. On March 15th at around 12:30 a.m., Margaret Kobenis was run over by a white cargo van and left in critical condition with broken bones to her pelvis, shoulder, and ribs. APTN News previously spoke with Margaret while she was healing in hospital and met with her mother where the incident happened just south of Winnipeg's Osborne Village neighborhood. On Wednesday, Margaret took to social media to update her followers about the arrest. In that video, she says the driver has been arrested and is in jail, and his court proceedings will likely be during the summer. She also added that the driver is facing multiple charges and thanks the Winnipeg Police Service for all of their work. The Winnipeg Police Service tells APTN News an announcement will be made next Monday. A protest following an alleged incident between a student and former Ontario Premier Mike Harris recently took place at a university. That story when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Indigenous and non-Indigenous students took to the streets on Thursday to call out Nipissing University for not doing enough to address a situation following an interaction between a student and former Ontario Premier Mike Harris regarding the Ipperwash crisis. CTV's Eric Tashner reports.
Break the chain and change the name!
Carrying signs and chanting, Indigenous demonstrators and allies demand action.
There's been overwhelming support for untangling Nipissing University from Mike Harris's destructive and colonial legacy.
Following a $2 million donation to the school by the Joyce Family Foundation 2 weeks ago, which Harris was in attendance for, fourth-year Indigenous student Cheyenne Sago approached him over the Ipperwash scandal. She asked him how he plans to reconcile with Indigenous youth after Harris made an alleged racist remark in 1995, a day prior to 38-year-old Dudley George's shooting death at the hands of OPP.
To Dudley George's family, we're still fighting to honor him, and we're still fighting for reconciliation, and this matters.
Sago says Harris responded saying he did want the protesters out of the park and that First Nations people were on Indian land.
That's the way I took it. It was confirmed to me. He said, "Excuse me," and he put his hands on me with the pamphlet, and he's like, "All right." And I said, "Get your hands off me, don't ever touch me again."
Harris and other witnesses have repeatedly denied that he ever made the expletive statement that Sago is referring to. However, the former commissioner of the Ipperwash Inquiry wrote in his final report that he didn't believe the premier. Demonstrators want an apology and argue the university has not taken any meaningful action to stand by its commitment towards reconciliation, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility. They're also calling for the school's Harris Learning Library to be renamed immediately.
Now is not the time to start the conversation. It is time to act.
The school says it is investigating. A third-party audit underway at the university around creating an inclusive campus is being conducted, which will be completed in the summer.
We will have a look at those recommendations and we will bring them forward to the Board of Governors for approval, and then we will be accountable for carrying out those actions.
We got to have Indigenous perspectives. We need to have that inclusion, that diversity.
In a statement tonight from the former premier, Mike Harris writes in part, "The interaction with Miss Sago took me by surprise as she approached me as I was leaving, and I find it unfortunate that she was left with an unfavorable impression. Since the 1990s, significant progress has been made on the path towards reconciliation, and I fully support those efforts towards building a better, more inclusive future for all Indigenous communities."
Break the chain and change the name!
Eric Tashner, CTV News, North Bay.
A new HIV prevention drug is now covered under the non-insured health benefits program for First Nations and Inuit. The injectable drug called APTN will reduce the risk of contracting the human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, through sex. APTN Sav Jonesa finds out how this health coverage might help Indigenous peoples who are disproportionately affected by HIV in Canada.
A new injectable medication for HIV prevention is now covered for First Nations and Inuit under the Non-Insured Health Benefits Program, or NIHB. APTN is a bi-monthly injectable that's more than 99% effective at reducing the risk of HIV transmission through sex. Certified registered nurse and Two-Spirit Health Director Jessie Dame says APTN is very exciting when it comes to combating HIV in Canada.
It's an injectable, so folks can get as minimal as 6 injections a year, which is extremely decreases barriers to pill access and to continuously having to go to pharmacies.
The human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, weakens the immune system against disease and illness and can lead to AIDS if left untreated. HIV is primarily transmitted through sex without condoms and shared injection drug needles. HIV can be acquired no matter your sexuality, gender, or race, but some communities are more impacted than others. The Public Health Agency of Canada estimated more than 62,000 people in Canada were living with HIV at the end of 2020. In that same report, they found Indigenous people made up approximately 10% of all people living with HIV in the country, though Indigenous people make up about 5% of Canada's population.
Indigenous people continue to represent the highest, or some of the highest numbers around HIV transmission within the country, and especially when we look at Two-Spirit, queer, and trans Indigenous folks. I think it's really important when we talk about HIV to really make sure we talk about the context. So unfortunately, Indigenous people are disproportionately affected by HIV, but that's due to racism and homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. So really putting the blame on the systematic structures that lead to the increase in HIV.
HIV prevention medication is also called pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP for short. Oral PrEP pills were already covered under NIHB before the Apretude injectable became available, but are less effective and require daily dosing or on-demand use. Dame says spreading more awareness and promoting education around PrEP and HIV is necessary for seeing lower transmission rates.
More conversations or kitchen table conversations is important. So we need to look at structures that support family members to get access to knowledge, to bring it home to community and share in community spaces. So we are currently investigating what Indigenous knowledge mobilization looks like and working with community to find and develop new tools.
You can find more information on the Apretude injectable at apretude.com or visit can.ca for resources on HIV within Indigenous communities. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thank you, Sav. We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation with us. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, you can go to www.aptnnews.ca. And you can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. We now want to tell you about this week's 3 web poll questions. Over on our website, we ask, do you think a federal law banning residential school denialism is enforceable? Your answers are yes, no, or unsure. Our second question we ask, will you be more likely to vote in the federal election if you lived in a swing riding? Your answers are yes, no, or unsure. And our third question we ask, who is your favorite Juno Award-winning artist? Sebastian Gaskin in Manitoba, Alyssa P, Snotty Nose Res Kids. You can go to our website at aptnnews.ca/polls to cast your ballot. Our host of Nouvelle Nationale, Kim Sullivan, is up next. Plus, APTN Investigates is being recognized yet again for their great work. Those stories after the break. Starting on the east, Fredericton 6, Charlottetown 3. -9 in Cartwright, Happy Valley, Goose Bay -5. Gaspé -1, Quebec City 5. Toronto 6, Sarnia 7. Sudbury 3, Sioux Lookout 0. -10 in Churchill, Thompson -10. Dauphin -7, Gimli -2. -9 in Yorkton, Swift Current -6. -16 in Stony Rapids, Buffalo Narrows -9. 14 in Peace River, Fort McMurray 7. 8 in Lethbridge, Red Deer 10. 15 in Kamloops, Bella Coola 17. 11 in Fort Nelson, Dease Lake 9. 9 in Watson Lake, Dawson 7. 4 in Wrigley, Watee -3. -5 in Fort McPherson, Colville Lake -5 as well. -13 in Baker Lake, Chesterfield -13. And Arctic Bay -19, Clyde River -18. Thanks for staying with us. As per every Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, APTN's Nouvelle Nationale delivers your news headlines in French. Our host Kim Sullivan joins us now to share what the show tackles this week. Tanse, Kim.
Bonjour, Kristen.
Kim, our French viewers will get to hear about the turmoil happening in Kanesatake. Tell me about that.
Well, yes, as you may know, the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake confirmed an ethics commission comprised of non-community members, and they have ousted the Grand Chief Victor Bonspiel and Chief Valerie Bonspiel last month. So we're actually going to look more into that story.
And you also spoke with the president of Indigenous Business about Trump's tariffs and their impacts. What happened there?
We know that this is very scary for so many small businesses, so we headed out to Bastien Industrie in Wendake here in Quebec. They're the only Indigenous owned and operated moccasin manufacturer left in North America, and they explained that on Turtle Island, those borders between Canada and the States, they don't exist, so of course these tariffs could potentially harm small Indigenous micro businesses. And
Kim, he even gave you a few tips to encourage the Buy Indigenous initiative, eh?
It's a great initiative, Creason, how to recognize the logos and so much more, but I'm not going to tell you all the tips. You're going to have to watch En Français tonight.
All right, I can't wait. Thanks so much, Kim.
Au revoir.
The Canadian Association of Journalists, or CAJ, has announced its finalists for the 2024 CAJ Awards, and our teams at APTN Investigates and APTN News have received some nominations. The APTN Investigates story, Food for Profit by Brittany Guillot and Tom Fenario, is a finalist for the broadcast over 5 minutes category. APTN Investigates' Tamara Pimentel is also a finalist for human rights reporting for her story Beyond the Strip. APTN's Odette Auger is also a finalist for Emerging Indigenous Journalists Award, and APTN's Jesse Andrushko, Mark Blackburn, and Daniel Paradis are finalists for the Environmental and Climate Change Award for their work on The Place That Thaws, the untold stories of resilience and adaptation in the high Arctic. Judges made the finalist selection after a record 540 submissions. The gala event will be held on May 31st at the Delta Hotel in downtown Calgary. Big congrats to all of our APTN staff for that big recognition. That's your Friday daytime newscast for this April 4th. Dennis Ward is back for your evening newscast. Make sure to join us then. From all of us at APTN National News, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again on Monday. Excellent.